Welcome to Two Deep, Hokies Under the Influence, a Sons of Saturday podcast brought to you by Jack and Coke. I'm your host, Pete B. I don't have Sam Jesse with me here today, but I do have founder of the Sons of Saturday, Billy Ray Mitchell here, and we have a special guest. It's my pleasure to introduce Dan Rubenstein. Dan, thanks for joining the show.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me. Can't wait.
Yeah, Dan has been the co-host of the Solid Verbal for well over a decade now with his partner, Ty Hildenbrandt. We got the pleasure of talking to Ty, BRM and I did before the season, and Bill even caught up with him just after the Franklin hire to get some of his thoughts on that. And I've been a longtime fan of your guys' work over the Solid Verbal. My early podcasting days were certainly modeled after what you guys did. So for that, I am appreciative, and this is an honor. So Dan, once again, thanks for joining us.
Let's listen. Thank you for coming on. I appreciate your audio quality, your production value. We've spent a lot of time figuring out how to get all of our technology right. And so I know that when we started, there just wasn't anything out there in terms of modeling. And so I'm always so happy. Look, if you're nice dudes, if you do a good show, if it's a good conversation, sure. But you kind of know people are going to care based on how they sound and how they look. And you guys both, I don't know, you're getting it done. So I appreciate your focus. So I know Ty's happy with that too.
Dan, you got to take some credit for that. I don't know if you remember this, but November 12th, 2019, I sent you all an email.
Okay.
And these were the three things that you said. You said, keep recording, be yourselves, push yourself creatively. And the fourth thing was audio. And you wrote a whole blurb about you have to not sound awful. So those are the four rules that you floated out. But
have you guys ever listened to a podcast? I'm sure you have, right? Whether it's about sports, whether it's about whatever. And they're like, oh, we're having this guest on. You're like, oh, I really like that actor or writer or whatever. And then it's just like, yeah, I guess I started up.
Yeah, it's horrible. It's such a disappointing feeling.
You want me to listen to this for 47 minutes?
Yeah.
And you guys were at the forefront of that. And you're right. Going back in the day, finding the right microphones or mixers or advice it wasn't there. And now it's just everywhere. The mic industry, I mean, gosh, to be a mic producer at this day and age, there's so many sold, I feel like, every minute. I just looked up yesterday. There's something like 400,000 active podcasts in the US. Active. That's not all.
You really, truly, this is my best advice for anybody. If you're starting a podcast, if you're trying to figure out audio and stuff like that, I'm looking at your two rooms. I'm seeing soft filled rooms. You don't need to spend a ton on a microphone. If you have hardwood floor, if you have, tile or whatever, put down a cheap IKEA rug, right? Put things on your walls, go get a cheap couch, get a cheap chair, just fill your room with things that are soft. I see curtains over your windows, like some kind of grown up. That's a big deal. And so,
I am at my parents' house.
your parents would be terrific podcasters.
Yes.
I don't know if their opinions are great, but their sound and their audio, it's just I don't know. It's just bare minimum caring about whatever you're doing, taking pride in what you're doing, and you don't have to spend money. That's the broader point.
You just got to set the pillows up behind the laptop screen. Just
Totally.
something. All right. Well, in today's episode, we are going to talk about the playoff. We're going to go through the hateability rankings of the 8 teams left.
Man.
How much do we hate them? How much do we like them? Who are we rooting for? And the teams that can actually win the Natty of the final 8. I want to get Dan's thoughts on that. Some in-depth thoughts on his Oregon Ducks against Texas Tech. Coaching carousel, Michigan, LSU. We're going to cover that. And of course, we're going to be sprinkling in Hokies and then doing a little bit more heavy on the Hokies a little bit later. Bill, why don't you kick us off with a cheers/haiku?
So a cheers/haiku. This one comes from Pete McGee. Dan does it the best. College football, tortoise shell, a master wordsmith. Well done, Pete McGee. Well done.
Yes. Thank you for the submission.
Thank you,
Pete. First and foremost, Dan, have you been enjoying bowl season? Any highlights from you from the past couple of weeks outside of the playoff?
Yeah. I have been enjoying it, but it's been sort of limited for me. I was in Mexico last week because we live in a cold place and my wife's family has a timeshare in Mexico, and we try to strategically go between playoff rounds. And so we just didn't get a ton of channels to watch all of the bowl games. So I'm still catching up. But I did watch the Hawaii Bowl, which was quite fun with Hawaii's comeback going down 21-0 and then coming back and winning that game. I enjoyed that. I watched a chunk of the Pop-Tarts Bowl, which obviously is a very likable bowl game. I watched some of the Idaho Potato Bowl, but I haven't watched a ton yet. And it's basically been because of travel and like even like the more attractive matchups like the Pinstripe Bowl, where you just like have the opt-outs of Clemson and Penn State, it becomes a little bit tougher to get up for it. And so usually what I'll do is I'll watch games when I'm free, and after bowl season and playoff season, I'll go back and just sort of catch up to sort of get a better sense for everything happening. But like it's the sport itself has weirdly pointed us towards the playoff and the coaching carousel and the portal. And then there's these sort of games on in the background, which is a shame because I have nothing but incredible memories about bowl season. But in terms of the news cycle and the conversation, it feels like they've taken a back seat, which is unfortunate. So no, I don't have anything specific thus far. I'm like kind of excited to see, sort of lame duck situations like, the Michigan game against Texas, stuff like that. But like, you're dealing with teams with a ton of opt-outs, especially with, Texas with opt-outs and portal and key guys, especially on offense. But like, it's a weird time for bowl games, I guess.
I think you hit the high point with the Hawaii Bowl because that was really fun. And a lot of people were watching that game because it was Christmas Eve and people were home. But I did appreciate how they've moved the portal window to January. I think that resulted in less opt-outs. The ones we saw in Penn State and Clemson were a lot of like NFL related opt-outs rather than guys just not wanting to play.
Right. No, that's totally true. And the matchups this year maybe didn't feel as sexy, like teams coming down from like disappointing ends of the season, like Virginia losing the ACC championship and like playing in a low scoring game against
Virginia Mizzou Taxslayer Bowl was a tough watch.
That was tough. I'm excited to go back and watch Houston LSU. That seemed like it was like kind of fun back and forth.
Yeah.
I saw chunks of North Texas, San Diego State as I'm going through this, but like, yeah, in terms of like the actual quality of the matchups, I guess we'll see what happens on, there's a bunch on New Year's Eve, I believe, right? We have
we have
ASU,
a whole
Duke,
slew of games before
Iowa,
the playoff game.
Yeah. So that's at least something. So I guess I'm excited for this last stretch of non-playoff bowls.
Yes, sir. All right, let's get to our first segment, which is going to be our hateability rankings. We brought this up in our chat a bunch because Notre Dame, after getting left out of the playoff, they kind of threw a hissy fit and their likability started to plummet because over the years, Notre Dame's been a pretty hateable team, right? Like whether it's Brian Kelly, Charlie Weiss, they're always seem to be overranked higher than they should be. And then Marcus Freeman kind of made us like them. They became a little bit more likable, at least to me and BRM.
Unhateable. Marcus Freeman is unhateable. Ian Book, to a large degree, is unhateable. Like they started to build some characters that you enjoyed.
Yeah, yes. I agree.
So they do the little hissy fit. They get mad at the ACC. Their Q score took a hit. Then you have Michigan and everything that went down there, plus the fact that they had Harbaugh, who was a little bit prickly, and they won the title. And usually you want to see good teams fail, so a little bit hateable for Michigan.
Well, they out the Stallions thing too, right?
The cheating scandal, of course.
Yeah.
And then for VT, the Penn State fans and that whole program has become very hateable for us because the war between like the Franklin commentary, every time we say anything about Franklin, we're getting Penn State fans in our comments. So they've taken a hit to VT fans. We've always kind of had a soft spot for Penn State. I think that's kind of switched, if you ask me and Bill at this point. So let's talk about the teams in the playoffs. You look at the list of the final 8.
Yeah.
What would be, in your opinion, the team let's start with who you're rooting for outside. Let's take Oregon out of it because that's kind of like your school there. Who are you rooting for in this playoff? Who are you happy to see in the playoff?
Indiana is okay. Indiana is an extraordinary story. I think I like Kurt Signetti. It goes back and forth with me. Like he seems prickly, but like I'm positive that if I were an Indiana fan, I would have such an undying love for Kurt Signetti that I have to respect how brash he is. I have baggage with Miami and Mario Cristobal, but I also recognize that like this is a long-suffering fan base that's been through it. And so there is a weird thing where their fan base isn't huge, but they're extremely vocal. So there is a certain chippiness to that fan base and program that I respect, but also can become annoyed with as dealing with Miami fans can be
Mm-hmm.
tiring. Ohio State's fan base and the Ohio State program, I think has a good amount of hateability, though I like Ryan Day. Like, I don't think their personality, like there's nothing, I don't think anybody has any like personality opinions about Julian Sayin.
Yeah, it's more of like the big money. They just won it all. They're
Totally.
the successful program that just makes them hateable.
Yes. And they've, to be fair, like we have a short memory here, but like Ohio State was full on shut out in a playoff game by Clemson. Something like was like 30-0, 31-0, about a decade
That's
ago.
crazy to think about. Yeah.
So they've taken their lumps in the playoff, as well as, you know, winning a national championship last year and the first season of the college football playoff. But yeah, the degree to which like Ryan Day was reportedly harassed after losing to Michigan last year, all of the money and, you know, I don't think like Les Wexner is a super likable dude, money behind the scenes with Ohio State. So I would say Ohio State is probably a top, like objectively the most hateable program left in this right now.
That's like, a good one. I like that one.
Like, I understand that like people enjoyed hating on Nick Saban, but at a certain point he had won so much where you're like, I gotta respect this excellence, right? And there were likable players in Alabama forever, but I don't feel like Kalen DeBoer Alabama is as hateable because they've been knocked down a few pegs these past couple years.
Billy, where do you come in at on the most hateable team in the playoff?
A couple things on what you just said, Dan. First of all, it's interesting how Curt Cignetti has avoided. So Pete's a Sixers fan and I'm a Celtics fan, and I always use this reference. It's that Marcus Smart kind of thing where it's like, if he's on your team, you love that guy. If he's not on your team, you hate that guy. I don't know how Cignetti has avoided that because he's done everything to be like, wow, I hate this guy. And somehow he avoids it. And it's probably the fact that he's at Indiana. But the hateable team to me has to be Ohio State. And I think if you get Texas Tech into the playoff a couple more times simply because they're spending more money than everybody else, like Texas Tech has had, I would say, pretty equal amount of historic success to Arizona State. But when Arizona State made the playoff last year, it was like, oh, it's the poor team that did really well with the likable coach who jumps in there. Now Texas Tech is in there, fair or unfair, unbelievable linebacker who should have been a Heisman finalist, unbelievable job by this coach to coach him up the way that he has. But they're kind of looked at as just this team that bought their way into the playoff, fair or unfair. Right. I think if you see them make the playoff a couple more times, they're going to get into that hateability.
It's that right now, Texas Tech is the fun party crasher to an extent.
Sure.
That, and not a typical powerhouse, but there is a little bit of a New York Yankees approach to what they've done with their roster. Not that Ohio State's not doing it. It's just, it's so overt with someone like Texas Tech, who is not a blue blood. Yeah, I still have Texas Tech in the likable category, but you're right, Bill. Like
they're toeing the line.
They're flirting with
the line. What's crazy though, Dan, to your point, Oregon, is there a team that has had a higher watermark of historic success that is completely avoided being dislikable? Like, I don't know anybody who doesn't compete against Oregon as a rival who hates Oregon. Lovable players, iconic uniforms, still vying for the national championship. How do you guys skirt past hate? I don't understand it because I'm victim to it too. I love Oregon.
I think you may live in a bubble. And that's okay. That's okay. You're living in New Jersey, which is, you're probably not encountering a lot of West Coast college football fans a good deal. You're probably not like coming across USC fans or Washington fans with regularity.
Okay.
And we shouldn't skip Oregon. I think there's a good case that Oregon is one of the more hateable teams in this quarterfinals.
Wow.
And I happen to love Oregon because I went to Oregon. I'm from the West Coast. And it's another situation where, like, if Dan Lanning were your coach, you'd love him. But with some of the, like, behind the scenes and his emotions and his volume, and I think there are a lot of people who like making fun of Oregon because they get far but never quite get there and win, and the way that like Oregon was making like these mini films about themselves last year and this year, you know, behind.
I love them.
Really,
I watch them all the time.
Great job. Again, I'm a biased narrator here, but like everybody's like sharing these clips of Dan Lanning yelling and inspiring the team, and then they go down 34-0 to Ohio State. So there's like the Schadenfreude element of like, yeah, you can beat up on Washington and USC, but like when you play like the big boys, you know, you get blown out by Georgia in your first game and you lose to Washington all those times, like 3 times in a row. I think if you were to take this conversation to the streets on like University Avenue in Seattle by campus, you would get so many answers about how hateable Oregon is.
Of course, people that are competing against Oregon. But if you go to SEC fans or ACC fans, I think their default is, yeah, I like Oregon.
I think, it's partially like the style, the Nike thing, the uniforms. Bill went over some of the stuff, but also like fun athletic teams. And I find Dan Lanning charming isn't the right word, but I do find myself kind of loving him as an outsider.
Well, because you want your coach, whether you're a fan of a struggling team, a mediocre team, whatever, you want your coach to care like he very clearly cares.
Yes.
And you want your coach to be capable of going to money behind the scenes and inspiring them to open up their wallets. And so Dan Lanning checks both of those boxes, right? He gives a shit. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear.
You're allowed to curse. It's fine.
He gives a shit. And Phil Knight loves him. The money behind the scene loves him. And he cares in like a 360 way about like, how do we market this team? How do we get this image out there, which aligns with like the Nike Oregon flash? And the secret sauce to Oregon is exactly what you're talking about, that generations now since the early 2000s grew up with Oregon as their secret favorite team.
Jeremiah Masoli,
before he went, because of their the athletes on the football team, because of the style they played with Chip Kelly and the speed that they were able to recruit and develop, that like Oregon had that a certain amount of brand quality that people just loved when they were, that appeals to kids getting into the sport. And so you grow up as an Oregon fan and you're just like, how can you not like Oregon? They're so
and this
fun.
is what you were missing, was a coach that was likable. I mean, you had Chip Kelly, you had Mario Cristobal, and who was in between there? Was Willie Taggart in between those two?
Willie Taggart, you had Mark Helfrich, who was Chip's offensive coordinator, and then he didn't work out, and they bring in Willie Taggart for a year. He shows that they can recruit on a higher level. He leaves for the Florida State job after a year. Mario Cristobal, who was his offensive coordinator and offensive line coach, takes over. He's there for 4 years, builds on the recruiting, and they hire Dan Lanning when Cristobal leaves for Miami. But yeah, there is that element to Texas Tech that is also true of Oregon. The difference with Oregon is they've been winning for 25 years. And have finished ranked and have won conferences and played in big bowl games. And there was, I think, I might get the year wrong, but it's right around like a 16-year dip between years in which Texas Tech finished a season ranked. And so, look, Texas, again, every program would love to have the money and aggression that Cody Campbell and Texas Tech have. So I don't think Texas Tech is super hateable in this moment, because you're like, yeah, if we had an oil baron, we would love for them to be spending as well. And Texas Tech fans kind of are very sensitive about the idea that they're just buying their wins when it's the same coach, a lot of the same players on offense. They happen to portal in a bunch of terrific defensive linemen and help to develop these two great linebackers. The secondary is, we'll see. And they bring in a good defensive coordinator, and good for them.
And it's worked wisely. Out. Like, you a lot of teams try this. It doesn't always work.
Correct.
And everyone kind of, it's very far from a Cinderella, but it still kind of has a Cinderella feel because they haven't been the top-notch program. Okay, 2 things here. One, content idea for Dan. You mentioned Chip Kelly. He is now back in your neck of the woods at Northwestern, because Dan's outside of Chicago.
Yeah.
Content idea. You two need to go get a deep dish pizza together in the suburbs of Chicago and enjoy it and film it and do an interview. That's what I want to see out of you.
Okay.
On the hateability. Sorry, go ahead.
Can I respond to your pitch?
Yeah,
we do one at a time? Okay. He's from the East Coast. He's not going to like deep dish. I'm from the West Coast and spent 8 years in Brooklyn. I think there's different styles of deep dish. If we want to be very,
you're also a huge pizza guy, I should note.
I'll just have him over to my house and I'll make him some great pizza.
Okay, we can do that.
Salad. Yes, there's good pizza in Chicago. Let's be clear. And there's different styles of pan pizzas that aren't deep dish, and we can go whatever. But yes, he has an open invite to talk all things Oregon football and how he picked Oregon apart as Ohio State's offensive coordinator last year in the Rose Bowl. Yes, absolutely.
On my hateable teams, and I'm sure the Virginia Tech fans who are watching this are like, how are you not saying Miami's hateable? They are my number one hateable team in the playoff left. I realize what Dan said is true. Like, they haven't won an ACC title. They've been down on their luck for 20 years, but it's still Miami. They have the high price QB. They kind of have this. Mario's not a clown, but there's clown tendencies with some of the stuff he does in games. They always seem to underachieve until recently. And even recently, you could say they've underachieved the last 2 years, but they still got in the playoff. But Miami, for me, they still have to be my number one hateable team. I don't disagree with Ohio State being hateable.
Right.
We haven't discussed Bama or Georgia. Where do you guys sit on those two teams?
The tough part with Miami is just like Malachi Tony is just so awesome. Anytime he's interviewed, anytime he does anything, you're just like, wow, this guy's awesome. Carson Beck is having like a Rachel Platten fight song moment. Like, he's just like, everybody hated him. And like, now he's kind of come back a little bit. And they're playing against, to me, the most hateable team left in the bracket for most college football fans. And ACC, please do something. Show a heartbeat. Like, please.
Hey, at least they got the win in College Station. That was big for the ACC to get.
Yes, as far as Alabama and Georgia are concerned, I feel like they're just always going to be in the playoff. I like Kirby. I like DeBoer. But the one for me is I'm just so fascinated by Ole Miss. Like, the whole team is probably leaving. They're good enough to win a game or two in the playoff. And it's almost like they're almost like the representation of, I would put Tulane and JMU in like that. They probably can't do that much, but then Ole Miss is in that, like, who the hell knows what's going to happen with this situation? Division II quarterback. Like, I don't know if likable is the word, but riddle me extremely intrigued and excited to watch every minute of them being on the television.
I think Ole Miss is probably, like, if you are coming at this from a completely neutral standpoint, if you're a Kansas State fan or something, just interested in the playoff, Ole Miss might be the most rootable team left, just because, look, they can take down Georgia in a revenge spot. They don't have Lane Kiffin. So they're like weird college football orphans in the college football playoff. They have a D2 quarterback. Their shade of baby blue is an extremely likable shade. Should they wear that?
I like when they wear those uniforms.
They play a fun style. They have likable offensive talent. They're not known this year in the way that they were last year with, like, spending the incredible amount of money on the portal, even though there is a good chunk of this roster that's from the portal. I think you have to be careful in terms of hateable. Like, do you separate the team from the fan base? Like, and like, you include the coach is the face of the team. You include players, you include style of play. But, like, I don't think you fully can. But, like, Texas Tech, for instance, likable story. The defense is super likable. Like, Baron Morton has been sort of brittle, but he's healthy and playing through a big injury, and he seems likable. And there's, like, likable dudes. They have, like, the most penalized offensive lineman in America, I think. Their left tackle, Howard Sampson, has 15 penalties this season, which is a lot. Texas Tech fans, though, it seems, in my experience, have been good for a season. And going into this game against Oregon, arguably their biggest game ever, insulted that they're not favored, that anybody would think Oregon could beat Texas Tech, and that it's insane to question Texas Tech's excellence after a good season.
That's the vibe you're getting?
That's what I've gotten as an Oregon human talking about Oregon in the videos.
I feel like a lot of the experts, analysts, whatever you want to call them, are picking Oregon in the game. And
totally.
That's a good segue to talk about that game. Just to put a pin in or a nail in the hateability rankings. We're going to agree Ohio State's number one, I guess, as a collective. They're the most hateable. Are we going to go with that?
Yeah, again, but that could be my baggage because I watched.
The fans definitely count. And I also think I was just talking about this with my buddy Casey. Musk's algorithm is playing, because Casey will call me and be like, are you seeing all of these people saying that Miami is more talented than us? I'm like, no,
I'm not saying that.
I'm not saying that. I'm not. That somebody has your phone and is they're not saying He's like, I see it everywhere, dude. I'm like, who? Alabama fan 67? Like, who's tweeting that?
Yeah, it's a lot of it has to do with your consumption diet. And like, you know, I'm posting videos and seeing the comments on YouTube. I don't really go on Twitter, X, or Blue Sky that much anymore. But I want to build our YouTube
Yep.
channel. So I'm like on there all the time.
Yep.
And so I do see the conversation, but like, yes, you're right. The diet of like the people who are sort of enraged and engaged the most are the ones who are most likely to comment. Like
Correct.
if you watch one of our videos, one of your videos, and your reaction is like, "Oh, that was pretty good. I think they had some interesting things to say." That person is less likely to leave a comment than the person
Yeah.
who is like, "Yes, finally,
Yeah.
you're saying what we're all thinking," or "You're such an idiot." So yeah, you got to be careful about like believing the good stuff, believing the bad stuff. And most of the people who think your stuff is like pretty decent, they're just like going on with their day.
Yeah.
I kind of split the teams down the middle, like Miami and my hateable, Ohio State, Georgia because of the recent success, and Bama just because of the 20 years of success. Like they're on the hateable side of the 8. If you go to the likable, Indiana, Oregon, Texas Tech, and Ole Miss.
I can sign off on that. I think that's well done.
Yeah.
Right.
The Kurt Signetti point, by the way, is interesting that he's escaped the like the focus because Indiana's such a good story because they were so terrible for so long as a program, and he comes in and he's just like an assassin.
Like nobody wants to punch him in the face, but if he's at any other school, everybody wants to punch
Google
him.
me.
Right. But you're absolutely right. It is the winning that makes up for it. It is the place and the scenario in which he has Indiana as the number 1 team in the country. And
they
again,
were the losingest program in college football. And so you're not just going to hate them right away, even if he is the bravado that he has.
I totally agree. But like, if you were to take him in a vacuum, like, I think we like coaches with a distinct personality, whatever that personality is, right?
Yeah.
If it's a meathead thing, if it's a yelling thing, if it's like goofy and taking off your shirt like Jim Harbaugh, like a satellite camp, like you want to have some sort of understanding because there are 2 sports to college football. There's the like on field, and then there's the like marketing and brand positioning, whatever. And like
that personality. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I was just like, you look at and listen and watch Kurt Signetti, and you're just like, this guy would be a lot of, painful minutes on a road trip, right? Where he's just like, no, you're doing it wrong. Let me tell you why.
And that works. The personality thing works as long as that coach wins.
Correct.
Right.
Totally.
Like, and then it goes the other way. And we're going to learn that with James Franklin. Like right now, there's a lot of clips and different things we're becoming familiar with that, oh wow, this guy's very distinct personality, and it's a refreshing change for us Virginia Tech fans. Whereas Penn State's coming at it from the other side, like, oh, this guy's a snake oil salesman. He's always, it's always the same 5 things out of his mouth. It's never different. So yes, it's all about the perception and how long you're exposed. But right now, Sig he can do no wrong because he's taking Indiana from nothing to number 1 team in the country.
Yeah, if he were at Michigan, he would be one of the most despised people in the sport, and that's okay. Like, in the way that like, and I don't follow college basketball that closely, but like Dan Hurley is like universally looked at as like a super hateable, obnoxious dude because he's at a national power. But also you can't kind of help but respect that he is as much of a killer as he is as a coach at the same time. So he is a thrill, I'm sure, for people who really pay attention to college basketball. He's a thrill to hate on, right? Because he is that visible and he does appear to be miserable.
And every sport needs villains.
Yeah,
they do. They just come naturally. Now let's move through this with I want to save some time for Hokies.
Sure.
For in the next 5 minutes, let's just go through these 4 games that we have coming up on Wednesday and Thursday. Dan, why don't you start with Oregon and Texas Tech? What's your read on this game? Because right now Oregon is favored by 2.5. I think that line has moved about 4 points since it opened.
Yeah.
How are you feeling about your Ducks?
I feel decent, not great, because when you have a defense that appears to be as talented and as aggressive as Texas Tech's, you have to like be very respectful of, potentially disastrous outcomes. I think Oregon in terms of talent, I think Oregon in terms of scheme, in terms of past results and past losses, and they had a couple close calls this year, namely like the Iowa one in the rain, but it has largely been to teams with explosive offenses, explosive passing attacks. We saw last year with Ohio State. We saw, those Washington games with Michael Penix from a few years ago, that if Oregon's going to lose a game, the overwhelming likelihood is you're going to have to score 30 plus to do so. And against this defense, and yes, James Madison did it in the first round against the third and fourth stringers in the fourth quarter. But the overwhelming opportunity to beat Oregon is you're going to have to score like 35 points against this defense, which I think if I were picking 20 quarterbacks in this nation and 20 offenses in terms of passing attacks and quarterback stealing, I don't think Baron Morton would sort of strike me as one of those. And doesn't mean he's not good, doesn't mean he's not capable. But I think Oregon's in a good position just because of that. Historically, I think where they are on defense, where they are on their defensive line, where they are in their secondary, and scheme-wise, outside of perhaps some red zone issues, I think Oregon should be in a good place to win this game with the sort of comma. But if they do turn the ball over a couple times, you're playing right into Texas Tech's hand, right? They're the number one team in college football in terms of, I think, offensive starting field position. So Texas Tech's defense gives its own offense the most advantages in this sport.
Yep.
And so Dante Moore did struggle with the Indiana pass rush, and that was, October. That was a while ago. Oregon does have a strong offensive line. I think the big concern would be Dante Moore, 3,000 miles from Eugene, Oregon, against a pretty terrific pass rush from Texas Tech, sort of losing his head a little bit in that same way, and Texas Tech giving itself opportunities to, have 38-yard drives. That would be the concern as an Oregon person. And from a Texas Tech perspective, it is the pop on offense, and they have been a very explosive team. But from a Texas Tech perspective, it's how seasoned and how tested are we coming from a Big 12, not that the Big 12 is bad, but coming from a Big 12 specific schedule that had them losing to ASU with, Texas Tech's backup quarterback, and then missing some of the better, most of the better quarterbacks in, Josh Hoover and Brendan Sorsby and Noah Fafita. Like, they just didn't, this defense kind of had the best selection of Big 12 quarterbacks to face if you were going to choose. And it's, can you keep Oregon under 24 points, 21 points? That would be the concern, because you shouldn't have a concern about, Texas Tech's ability on defense. Like, the defense is not going to lose them this game, but it's, what does this offense look like if they need to score 35? And so the path is clear for Texas Tech. It's turnovers, short fields, doing what they've done all season long, and hoping Oregon sort of goes into a shell. So I feel good about Oregon, but not great about Oregon.
You really summed that up pretty darn well there, because whether it's the turnover thing, like Texas Tech, number one team in the country in turnovers, the explosive play thing, these are the number one and number two team in explosive plays over 20 yards this year. Oregon's one, Texas Tech is two. The defense, Oregon's the second best rushing team in the country in terms of yards per carry. Texas Tech's the number one defense against yards per carry. So it's a little bit of strength on strength. I'm interested to see how that defensive line gets after Dante Moore. If they give him the problems that Penn State gave him, that Indiana gave him, that Iowa gave him, like, that's what I want to see. Now, in the Iowa game, there's some weather at play, but
by the way, they're going to get the best of these tackles sometimes. It's more going to be, what does Dante Moore look like evading rush, making plays off platform, because the left tackle or the right tackle.
And he's very good at that.
He can be very good. Yeah.
You know what this is it really is kind of a throwback. It happens to be in the playoff, but it's a throwback of what made bowl games great. Is it's two teams that never play each other with completely conflicting styles from different conferences.
Sure.
And to me, this is the most intriguing game by far of this round of the playoffs. It has to be. Yeah. To me, it's probably the most fun game to have nothing at stake. So apologies to you, Dan, but I'm just looking forward to watching it as a conscientious bystander.
You're great. I think they either played 2 or 3 years ago in Lubbock. And it was a Tyler Shuck game. I want to say it was who would have been starting? I guess Bo Nix for Oregon that year, because it wasn't Dylan Gabriel. So Dan Lanning and Joey McGuire have played against each other. But
was that week one?
It was early, maybe week two.
Yeah, okay. I remember that one.
Yeah, that was Oregon won on a late interception. But it was a good game. Lubbock's a tough place to play, but also you're like, these are the same two coaches, but two completely different rosters because they're two portal-heavy teams. So there's not much you can sort of glean. New defensive coordinator for Texas Tech. new quarterback. So they have played each other, but you're right. It's like you don't have a concept for how they would perform with no like crossover teams.
It has the most variability to me of any of the matchups, and that's why I'm looking forward to watching it the most. I could believe any final score in this game and be like, oh yeah, okay, that's how it went down.
Yep.
In the Cotton Bowl, we've got Miami against Ohio State. Ohio State 9.5-point favorites. Dan, how are you feeling about this? And let's do more rapid fire through these.
Yeah, sorry.
This is no, you're good.
I love hearing the sound of my own voice.
I just want to be conscientious of your time.
No, you're good. You're good. Miami, Ohio State should be super fun, and it's fun because we'll all be watching it at the same time, and we're all going to be watching these games. But there'll be so much more focus because it's the New Year's Eve game. This one's going to be great because you have Miami's clear strength against Ohio State's probable clear weakness in Ohio State's offensive line and how they didn't handle the Indiana pass rush against just a chaotic Miami defensive front. And so that's super fun. Seeing Julian Sayin on a stage like this for the first time. I mean, it was a big stage, against Texas, but and against Indiana, but this is just different than the Michigan thing, right? A down Michigan team sort of reeling. Julian Sayin and how much Ryan Day and Brian Hartline are open to having him force the issue, take shots, be aggressive. This was not an Ohio State team that could be considered aggressive this year. They weren't explosive. They struggled to run the ball the first half of the season. They didn't take a lot of chances. They didn't scheme up this offense to focus on speed downfield, even though they do have great receivers. So are they sort of willing to take the wrapper off of Julian Sayin in a moment like this in Texas? That to me is fascinating. And it's just like, there's no weather excuses for Carson Beck in the Miami offenses, right? They're playing indoors. I come down to Ohio State having more of the guys that I think can shine on a stage this bright than Miami does. And Miami has maybe the second best of them in Malachi Toney, but I just think Ohio State's 5th and 6th best players on defense are better than Miami's 5th and 6th best players in defense, and their 5th and 6th best offensive weapons are better than Miami's. And so to me, that's the difference. And I have Ohio State giving themselves a couple short fields, maybe forcing a turnover from Carson Beck. And I think I had them winning by around 10 points.
Yeah, you're right on that line. It's a good line. Me and Sam were talking about it last night. It feels about right. I don't think Carson Beck's going to be able to tear up that secondary. And if Miami wants a shot, their pass rush needs to do what Indiana did to Julian Sayin.
They need short fields, turnovers. Yeah.
All right. In the Rose Bowl, we got Bama against Indiana. Indiana 6.5-point favorites. Bama, you could argue they didn't deserve to be in the playoff, but they're here and they came back from down 17. Dan, I don't think this game's going to be very close. How do you feel about the game?
I think I like Indiana a good deal, but at the same time, Alabama's ceiling is extremely high because of their receivers, because of the back end of this defense, and they're beat up front on defense. Bama is, but they were able to get home against Oklahoma in that second half impressively. And this has not been a defense that has rushed the passer super well. I think Indiana's a better coach team. I think Indiana executes better. I think there's enough pop on this Indiana offense, especially if, Omar Cooper and Elijah Surratt are full go. I just think this Indiana team is built to take advantage of flawed teams. And Alabama has struggled against the run, or struggled running the ball, excuse me. So Indiana should be able to force them to be one-dimensional. They really forced Ohio State into a lot of issues on third downs and obvious passing downs. And I'm not in on Alabama not looking like a playoff team for too many stretches in these last few games. Taking on Indiana. Heisman Trophy winning quarterback. Fernando Mendoza in the red zone is going to be huge. How much does he use his legs? Alabama's been a really good red zone defense team. But I don't know. Indiana just seems so buttoned up, even with the extended time off. The rust factor will be interesting, but kind of if there's one team that I trust to sort of execute and have all their T's crossed and I's dotted, it seems like it's Indiana, and I just don't like how sloppy Alabama is for stretches. I don't know. Indiana's built to beat teams like that. So, yeah, I have Indiana winning.
You hit on this, Dan. The other thing that's crazy, and it's wild that it's Southern California that might fit into this, is we saw the weather directly impact the Texas A&M game. if Alabama has to throw the ball to win the game and it's apparently going to pour in Southern California, I doubly don't like Alabama's chances.
On real grass, not turf, I believe.
Yeah, because they don't have the running game. So if it's bad weather, it's extra bad. And you mentioned the thing about the rust. Signetti with extra time to prepare, that's someone you kind of feel confident in coming into that. Because we didn't see the teams with the buys last year do that well.
Right.
Like, and so I'm fascinated to see how that kind of plays out this season. And finally, we have the Sugar Bowl, 2 SEC teams in New Orleans, Ole Miss against Georgia. Georgia 6.5 point favorites. This is a rematch. And in the first one, Georgia kind of rolled through that defense. And we even saw Tulane move the ball on this Ole Miss defense. They don't have their coach anymore.
Right.
I lean Georgia. How do you lean, Dan?
Okay. So we recorded this show, the preview show yesterday. I talked about liking Ole Miss in this game, and I'm going to stay with it. I'm worried, you worry about picking against Georgia and what Kirby has accomplished in the postseason. I think their rust could be a little bit more pronounced, maybe even just in the first quarter and a half or something like that, just because they seemed to be, by and large, and the offense wasn't great against Georgia Tech, but they seemed to be peaking with how they played against Alabama, how they finished out the back half of their schedule. I think that time off could have hurt them, or could hurt them more than others. You're right about Ole Miss struggling with the Georgia defense. Ole Miss was up in the fourth quarter in this game on the road, and Georgia won behind basically a perfect game from Gunnar Stockton. And so the concern would be, one, it's tough to beat a really good team twice in the same season. And two, they barely win behind a perfect performance from their quarterback. So if Gunnar Stockton is merely good, or he's merely pretty good, what does Georgia look like in this game? And so I know, the rhythm of this game, and now Georgia is playing a team without its head coach, and there's, different factors at play for Ole Miss in a game like this. But the Georgia time off, coupled with Ole Miss finding its feet under Pete Golding, and look, it was one game, but they find their feet under Pete Golding offensively, and Charlie Weiss Jr. is still there. I don't love that both Trinidad Chambliss and Kejuan Lacey were hurt in the game against Tulane. So assuming reasonable health, and obviously Georgia's dealing with its own health issues, they might get a little bit healthier at receiver, but without their starting center at the same time. I'm going Ole Miss because maybe I just am wish casting here, that I think they can win in a shootout. I had it at like 35-32 again. But yeah, I can't ignore the fact that Georgia's defense has gotten so much better over the course of this season. But I don't know. I think I'm just going with my heart in this.
To your point, though, we have seen Stockton struggle at later points in the season. He didn't have a great SEC championship game.
No.
And they ended up crushing him anyway. But Bill, I have to assume you're an Ole Miss lean with some of your allegiances there.
I have a really hard time picking against Georgia. I would like to see Ole Miss win the game, but again, like the way that Kirby's team has been playing down the stretch, it's just so difficult to pick against them. And again, there's something about Gunnar Stockton's gumption level that I have a hard time picking against. It just seems like he's the kind of guy that goes out there and wills his team to win, and he also kind of matches the personality profile of his head coach. So, it's gonna be fun to watch. I do think this game can get away from. Ole Miss, and I'm kind of surprised that this line is not 9.5 or 10 points. To be honest,
well, I was surprised that the Indiana line wasn't larger. This one, I do, like I said, I do like Georgia to cover the 6.5, but I'm not. It's not an overwhelming feeling in any way. I could see
argue against that.
I could see Dan's situation playing out easily. Before we move on to the last segment, could I get a prediction for a Natty winner from both of you guys?
Ooh, can I just see the bracket real quick? I'm just going to throw the bracket up here because, again, I'm having trouble following who's going where. The other thing that I'll mention about Georgia real quick is they can win games different ways. Like the fact that they can outscore Tennessee and score 40 points to win a game if they need to is interesting to me. Dan, I'll let you go first.
Oh, I hate making picks like this.
You had to have thought about it, though.
Okay. So my big thing is combination of quarterback and defense. And if I'm going to go with who I believe has the best combination of quarterback and defense left, it's Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
That said, they did just lose to Indiana.
They did.
Yeah.
I think Ohio State's path may be more difficult if Georgia gets by Ole Miss, which they're favored to do. Georgia's playing at an extremely high level if the rust isn't there. Whereas Indiana might have Texas Tech, might have an Oregon team they already beat if they get past Alabama. So I'm going to say because of path plus quarterback and defense, I'm going to say right now Indiana.
Yeah,
Wow.
I'm right there with you, and I promise I'm not pandering. I really like the winner of the next round in the North region to win. I think it's going to be Indiana and Oregon, and I'd like one of those two teams to win because that like death battle of Ohio State and Georgia is going to be a tremendous game to watch. I don't know what type of shape either one of those teams are going to come out of that game in following that football game. So that's probably what I want too, Indiana or Oregon. I would love either one of those teams.
My concern about those teams, Indiana's down maybe its most productive defensive player in Stephen Daly, right? He got hurt against.
Don't hurt yourself celebrating.
Yes, don't hurt yourself celebrating. And so I think he led the nation in tackles for loss or was right there. Oregon has a really good defensive line, and they rotate in a bunch of guys, and they bring in like pass rush specialists. Their secondary is weirdly thin. They lost a couple of backups to the portal. And so, look, most teams are going to be screwed anyway if they lose a starting corner or two starting corners or something, or a starting safety. So Oregon's weirdly thin in the secondary, and their linebackers are just okay. Like, if you're going to look at this Oregon team and look at the position group that there's such a lopsided difference in, Texas Tech has extraordinary linebackers, and Oregon's linebackers are just okay. And so that would be the worry if I'm like Oregon national champion contender, is they do have something that can be exposed on their defense, and that's the back half of it at times. But otherwise, I wouldn't hate Oregon winning, obviously. I like those picks.
I'm taking Ohio State to win it all. This is a very challenging pick because, like you said, if they have to play Georgia or Ole Miss, it's a tough road for anybody. But I think in that Indiana Big Ten championship game, they had just beat Michigan for the first time in 4 years.
Totally.
That was their Super Bowl. That's what they wanted. They got to the Big Ten championship game, and that was Indiana's day. And it was still a really close game. I think if these teams met up again, or Ohio State plays a different team in the championship, I just think they're the most complete team front to back. And
they've been there.
But I'm hesitate on the pick because it would be a repeat. And that is just so challenging in what is the most difficult route to a championship we've had with these back-to-back 12-team playoffs. So it would be a super impressive feat. But right now, based on what I'm seeing in the bracket, like, I'm taking Ohio State. Don't feel super confident. I just want to enjoy watching these games.
Totally.
Okay. You guys can see the can on your screen. College Too Deep, brought to you by Jack and Coke. Two legends, one can. Jack and Coke, the #1 cocktail in the world, is available in a can at your local grocery and convenience stores. We appreciate Jack and Coke supporting the show all year long. Final Too Deep episode of 2025. Two legends, one can. Jack and Coke. Grab that variety pack. Jack and Cherry, Jack and Vanilla, and original Jack and Coke all in one box. Dan, are you a beer guy? I know you're a food guy.
Yeah. I'm more food than alcohol. I pick my vices, and so I go food over, booze and beer. But when it's really like, if I'm having great fish tacos, like a cold Mexican lager, delicious.
Yeah, nice. Yes, we do a lot of beer on this show. It's part of the theme, and had a lot of holiday beers, a lot of heavy stouts, some bourbon barrel type things. Do you ever get into any of that?
None of that. Ty gets more into like the specialty beer stuff. Again, like, honestly, my favorite beer is cold and in a can, and kind of like, I don't do light beer, but sort of lighter tasting. You're like 4.5% alcohol, like that kind of like Pacifico, maybe something local, something like that. I just like, I like it pairing with a burger or tacos or pizza or whatever.
A full flavored Pilsner or something like that. That you'll go down with some food.
Yes.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Quickly on Whittingham and Michigan, I just wanted to get your commentary on this. How did they land on their feet here?
Pure dumb luck. Look, so much of life is luck. We'll see how it works out. He's not young. This is not something he planned on. This is not something he left Utah for specifically, I don't think. It seemed like he wanted to stay at Utah, and Utah was ready to move on. They had named a coach in waiting, and he wanted a new deal with Utah, reportedly, and they wanted to move on after 2026 at the latest. And so he was very clear that he was stepping down and not retiring. And Michigan looked at who they were targeting as potential fits, and there either wasn't interest or the timing wasn't right for Michigan, given how late it was in the carousel season. And Whittingham sort of fell into their lap. And when they spoke with him, I'm sure it became clear that his football philosophy of, developing line play and running the ball and, focusing on the inside out and, hiring well. And he had a lot of guys, assistants who stuck around for a long time in Salt Lake City, that it seemed like a fit with what Michigan wants to be, which is, that power team that sticks to the old school Big Ten way of playing. And I assume they figured that they could have him hire guys who could recruit perhaps on a higher level than he did at Utah and expand his recruiting comfort zone. But it's wild that when you're comparing him against younger, more unproven guys and what his reputation is, that he sort of fell into their lap.
And they kind of fell ass backwards into a better situation than the one they had under Sharon Moore.
Oh.
They actually, this is like, the Mel Tucker thing. Initially, we thought Jonathan Smith was going to be similar, but the respectable nature and just pristine resume that Whittingham has, it's just, this is what Michigan needs right now.
Sure.
And they were so lucky that he was available for them to just go grab it. And what is a weird time in the cycle.
Yeah, and think about it too, like whatever the Utah weirdness with the end of his time there was, if they had hired Kyle Whittingham to replace Jim Harbaugh 2 years ago, Michigan fans, college football fans would be like, man, just bravo, got to tip your cap. What a hire. It's a little bit different given the timing and the nature of everything happening behind the scenes at Michigan and the AD and, everything that has happened in the past couple of years with Sharon Moore and the fallout with all the Connor Stallion stuff. But yeah, I think this would have been seen as a home run then and should be looked at as a very positive thing. Maybe age notwithstanding, as it is in 20.
Maybe not the most long-term solution for Michigan, but
if you're going to reboot your program, do it with Kyle Whittingham.
They could very well be an 8 or 9 win team next year. Like
totally. It's a tough schedule, but yes.
It is. Oh, that's true. It is a very tough schedule. Bill, do you want to get Dan's thoughts on the Hokies here?
So first of all, I've always enjoyed your Hokies commentary. The funniest of this year being the cologne, the new cologne with a little bit of BO. I thought that was hilarious and incredibly accurate. But I'm actually going to blame a little bit of this on your Oregon Ducks fandom and how much awesome apparel you all have. Because I was feeling the same way. When you first saw James Franklin in orange and maroon, we had him in like this, I don't want to call it a Walmart sweatshirt, but it wasn't the best sweatshirt when he was at his first game. And I think your reaction was, he looks a little uncomfortable. He looks a little bit like, he looks a little bit out of place. I want to get your full reaction for the James Franklin hire right now.
Yeah.
And has that stance changed at all? Because I think for Virginia Tech fans, we probably do all need a good hosing down a little bit.
A delousing, if you will.
Yeah.
Okay. My James Franklin opinion is very positive for Virginia Tech. It's been a talent thing. It's been a hiring thing for Virginia Tech in terms of assistants and losing assistants and losing. And I don't want to speak out of turn. You guys obviously know 400 times more about the Hokies and the program than I do. I think Brent Pry was given credit for sort of reforming local relationships, right? On like the high school level and like something that Justin Fuente had sort of abandoned. And the weirdness of Brent Pry returning is just, it's outstanding to me.
Yeah, that's one of the weird things we wanted to ask you about too, but you can get to that in a second.
Yeah. So just in terms of the James Franklin thing, the positive is he should be able to build out a roster. They should be aggressive in the portal. You've obviously talked about the investment behind the scenes financially in Virginia Tech athletics and football. I have every reason to believe that James Franklin is going to leverage relationships from Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Virginia Tech, whatever, and build this roster into something competitive in the ACC to the point where they should be like a 9-win team at minimum.
That would be great.
Seasons.
Yeah,
that would be awesome.
Right. So the weird stuff to me is, and that's the best of James Franklin. The weird stuff to me is still, and I had this reaction when the hire happened. Guy was trying to win a national championship at Penn State like 7 weeks ago, right? And now he's at Virginia Tech. Maybe not 7 weeks ago, whatever it is. To go from yes, we lost the Oregon game in heartbreaking double overtime fashion in a whiteout, to like a few weeks later putting on an awkward Virginia Tech sweatshirt. There is the like uncomfortable element of like, yeah, they were married for 27 years and he's engaged to a new person after 3 months. Like, that to me is just like, there's an ideal rhythm, and we don't live in an ideal world, obviously, but there's an ideal rhythm to like getting a new coach in who came up as a coordinator or a coach of a smaller school, and this is his big moment, and he's always been planning for this, and he's always been planning on hiring these guys. And I always hesitate a little bit with making a move too quickly after things don't work out somewhere else. And I worry about like the head coach who says, well, this always worked at my old school, so it should work here. And when you make that transition so quickly, the time it takes to understand a new place and what works in one place might not work at another place. I don't have specifics about what would work at Penn State and what wouldn't work at Virginia Tech. I think he's a super smart guy. He's coached at a lot of places. He has a good network of coaches he knows. The Brent Pry thing is whatever. But that would be the concern to me, where he's just taking the James Franklin coaching playbook to a new place and assume it's going to work there, rather
That
than
dynamic has never been brought up, and is such an interesting point because Virginia Tech has been struggling with the inverse of that, where our athletic department has been, well, Frank could win under these conditions, so therefore everyone else should win under these conditions.
Right.
It's interesting because that is 100% a completely fair and rational stance to have. It's just a completely rational and fair stance to have when you're looking at James Franklin as the subject to observe.
Right.
Whereas for Virginia Tech, it's like, oh, you do want to coach right now? Excellent. Because
Right.
if he doesn't want to coach right now, it's Virginia Tech head coach PJ Fleck, who, by the way, is undefeated in bowl games. Like, there are plenty of other options. None of them are James Franklin.
Right. I think, look, life is about taking risks. It's about taking big swings, because if you want to accomplish big things, you have to take big swings, right? You have to invest. You have to go after the guy with the highest ceiling. And the ACC is at a point where like a really good Virginia Tech with good defensive talent and an interesting quarterback and interesting receivers, all of which Virginia Tech has had in the last decade, just maybe not all at the same time, maybe not all coached by the right coach, is a team that can compete for the ACC, right? That there's no reason a good Virginia Tech can't be better than SMU, can't be better than this version of Clemson, can't compete with, a Miami team that can be up and down. There's no reason. But a lot of schools are saying that, right? That like, there's no reason Pitt can't be that team if they're really, really good. And
I mean, Duke just won the conference, so it's pretty clear that just about anybody can do
right.
it.
And so I understand it from a Virginia Tech perspective that like this has been a place where somebody has been able to win, but also you look at the last few years of Frank Beamer's time and you're just like, well, maybe it was a place where somebody could win on a high level. And so again, I don't blame Virginia Tech for making this move. I think the ceiling is a super interesting one, but we live in a different world than where we were when Frank Beamer was succeeding in Blacksburg. So I like the hire. I like the swing. I'm positive he'll have talent there. I wonder about if Penn State's issues were internal, right? That everybody was on edge, everybody was super tight with expectations and stuff. And then you're taking that coach and bringing him to a place that is sort of on edge and has higher expectations, not national championship ones, but you're like, this is the guy who is going to turn around this culture when culture was an issue to whatever extent at Penn State. You're like, all right, I think there's legitimacy to like a fresh start and a place that, is not expecting, wins over Ohio State type programs, every so often. I think it's a good hire. Like I'm much more bullish than bearish.
This will
those
sound
are things that give me pause.
This will sound so beta, and I definitely want it to be more than this, but it is nice that Virginia Tech is at least being talked about and part of the conversation, because this has a chance to be one of the coolest and most unique stories in all of college football. I just hope it's much more what we think James Franklin is going to be. I don't think it goes the direction of Bill Belichick. I think Coach Franklin is happily married, but in terms of or James Franklin is happily married. I hope that it goes in the direction of a redemption arc and It's gonna be it's gonna be fascinating to watch. Fascinating.
I expressed some of the stuff that Dan said, just not nearly as eloquently. Like after all the rumors were coming out, like I was on kind of a farther end of the spectrum of not necessarily being all in on James Franklin. Like he wasn't my top choice. And part of it was I wanted Dan Mullen. I thought Dan Mullen would have been a perfect fit for Virginia Tech. And he's not getting the sniffs. So it's clearly something's up there. But I would have. Bob Chesney was on my list. Alex Golish, like there was plenty of them. The concern with Franklin was because of what had just happened, because of the recent failure and such a unique top 5 to the bottom completely falling out. I had expressed it seems too soon. Like it seems like he needs. It seems like he needs a year off. And is him coming over here just? We use the term fresh start. This is really not a fresh start. It's the exact same thing.
Agree.
We still have the same coach that got fired on our team. So like this is far from a fresh start. We are so far from a fresh start. And that is the concern. It doesn't feel too slapped together. Like that's kind of what I think what Dan was saying there.
Yeah, okay, here's if I'm going to spin it positive, other positive things, right? It's again, I'm an outsider. The big criticism on Justin Fuente is relationships, it's recruiting, right? It's roster construction, it's staying modern, and running a program professionally. There were lots of stories behind the scenes that he was, he was not a culture guy. He didn't know certain things. He let certain things lapse. And Brent Pry was well-meaning, but wasn't the killer. And maybe didn't have the support he needed. When you bring James Franklin in, you have somebody with intimate knowledge and experience of like, what does a front office look like? What does a recruiting machine look like? And there have been criticisms of how like Penn State and the GM model of Penn State and paying players that shouldn't have been paid like a ton of money. There are those criticisms. But in terms of like bringing roster talent in and building a recruiting machine and a portal machine, that James Franklin is having conversations with class of 2028 parents right now, right? That like he understands that you're either all in this world or you're just never going to get to that 9-10 win threshold. So I like having a coach with that kind of mindset and experience in James Franklin, where like if you hire Dan Mullen, if you hire Bob Chesney, if you hire somebody else who's in that conversation, they're learning on the job.
I agree. And that's what we've like over the months, and you go through so many, our coaching cycle and how long we were in it. Like me and Billy had 5,000 conversations about what we need and what we don't need and whatever. But the builder that James Franklin is and the infrastructure he brings with him is something that Tech desperately needs.
Not to mention the fact that it's a perfect marriage of where everybody that I've talked to who isn't in the Virginia Tech sphere of Virginia Tech going from the bottom middle to the middle of funding to catapulting to the top 3, like regardless of who the coach is, it feels like you're actually playing ball for the first time in a very long time.
And it's a perfect storm of things coming together at once. And our ability to even go get James Franklin is because of some of that budget. But I think we covered that pretty well. We got to let Dan go.
Are there any more Edmonds family members that James Franklin can form a relationship
Fullers or Smiths or Edmonds, any Edmonds, whoever of them.
We've got to get in with like 5 families in the Virginia Beach area.
So many brothers. Still. I mean, we got one of the Gosnell brothers still on the team. There's so many of them that have played for Tech.
Were they twins on the defensive line or just brothers?
Hop and Skip.
Years ago. Yeah.
The Hopkins brothers, Derek Hopkins. Yeah, they were brothers.
Okay.
They were brothers. Yeah.
I didn't know if they were twins or just.
No, I don't think they were twins. I think they were a year apart.
Okay.
But they were.
Oh, the McDonald twins too. We had them.
McDonald twins.
There you go.
Too. Yeah. We did have a question from Pete McGee asking, why did you choose Oregon?
Oh, good question. I was born and raised in Southern California in the Los Angeles area. I wanted to go to a school with a journalism school. Initially, I wanted to go to USC. USC didn't want me. So that became easier. I don't
want Notre Dame either. So
yeah, exactly. I kind of knew I wanted to stay in the West Coast or West Coast-ish. And so a lot of the schools I applied to were in there. Oregon has a journalism school. I visited in May or something, and I was like, this is beautiful. It's probably never gray and rainy here. I was wrong about that. And honestly, like it was probably like the mid 90s football like explosion that they finally got good and went to a Rose Bowl and took on Penn State and got destroyed. That put Oregon on my radar. And then when I applied for colleges in like 2000, 2001, they were the one with the J school. I went up there and really liked it. It was a 2-hour flight from home, so it wasn't too far away, wasn't too bad. And I got into other schools that were either places that didn't really have journalism schools or were somewhere far colder. Like I got into like the Syracuse journalism school, and like it's great, but like I don't know. Like I heard from a friend who was a year older on the tennis team I played on in high school. He's like, they have tunnels between buildings.
Yeah,
because it's so cold. And I was like, oh, that's probably not a fit for me.
But kudos to you for getting in. That's a hard school to get into.
For Oregon? Syracuse journalism.
Journalism school. Yeah.
So that's how I ended up at Oregon. I was miserable for a couple years because of the cold and being homesick, but grew to love it, and haven't been back in a long time, dying to get back. And have nothing but fond memories about my last couple years when I was like actually in the journalism school and I had a radio show, and like that was really fun for me. So that's how
I remember like some old videos of you like going to a Stanford tailgate and interviewing people like, from way back in the day.
That was after I graduated, and that was a video series that I created for YouTube because, long story short, I was working in LA and I came up with this idea to interview tailgaters, and I made a website and put the videos on YouTube, and that got me hired by Sports Illustrated. But Oregon was really like, I talk about journalism school, and I've never been a journalist. I've never aspired to like be a reporter of any kind, but it was called electronic media at Oregon. And they were really good at like getting kids hands-on with not just equipment, but like I learned Final Cut Pro. And so I could just edit my own videos right away. And really liked that element of creating things. I've always been like with like the pizza, like I've always just like making things. And so the ability to go to Oregon, learn a bunch of stuff, software and hardware stuff, and then can go out into the universe and just make things myself instead of, relying on producers and editors and, shooters and all that kind of stuff. That was a big deal. And it's still, I edit all of our videos to this day. And so always grateful for Oregon for
and you were ahead of your time with that stuff, because now it's so easy now to do so much of that stuff. It was a lot harder back then.
When I went on the road before I went to Sports Illustrated, I borrowed my dad's like Sony camcorder. Like cameras were expensive, or they weren't made for, I was shooting on like physical tapes that I would have to import into my computer. And so like you had to make the effort to do it. But when I went to Sports Illustrated, one of my like selling points, because they had a series that was like kind of a college football like travel show with I don't know if you remember Jen Sturger, the Florida State cowgirl.
We're familiar. Yep.
Yeah.
She had that travel show before the scandal and everything.
Right. Before the Jet stuff. And I've heard nothing but good things about her personally. But when I went to Sports Illustrated, I was like, okay, I did something similar. I did it myself. And I can do it myself. You don't need to hire a production company. You don't need to hire somebody to go with me. I'll hire somebody I know that can do a decent enough job shooting it, and I'll edit it myself.
Yeah, it's like, and I'm cheap. I can do this on the cheap.
I'm just as like a recommendation for life. If you have a skill that you feel like you can do inexpensively yet efficiently at high quality, it'll take you pretty far. So that was something Oregon gave me that I'm still grateful for, that I could figure out how to do it on my own. And it worked out.
Do you feel obligated to wear Nike?
Good question. I just had this conversation yesterday. I still play tennis. I think I'm moving on from Nike tennis shoes to Asics, but in my normal everyday, I wear a lot of Air Max 1s. And I like Nike's style. So maybe it's just been brainwashed into me. But yeah,
we're pretty close in age, Dan. And I just think like, I'm transitioning to Asics. It's like, well, no shit. You're in your 40s. Like,
well, here's the thing with the Nike tennis shoes. Like you have to be, I'm sure people care about this so specifically. I don't want to spend $180 on tennis shoes. I do play a lot of tennis, but that's just not a price point that I'm looking to hit on my tennis shoes. So you got to have to wait for like aftermarket, eBay, maybe you buy it in a colorway that you don't love, but the shoes are good. And I don't know if my feet are wide or something like that, but I've tried out different Nike tennis shoes and they're kind of cramped for my feet. And so like, I've heard the Asics are great. I'm going to
They have a narrow toe box, those Nikes, as they say. Yes. I gotta show you this. My buddy got a pair of Asics loafers. I don't know
Great.
if you could see this.
I can see it.
Absolutely ridiculous.
Great.
But he had them on at the bar the other day, and we were just clowning him. Just the fun. They're like penny loafers, but they're Asics.
But I'm telling you, maybe you're not at that age yet. Maybe you're still in your mid-30s or something. I don't know. You're gonna come to realize that you as a human, everybody take out a legal pad and write this down. You are only as comfortable as your feet are. Write it down. So if you find out that you're a New Balance guy, if you find out you're an Asics guy, if you find out you are a hiking boot guy, if whatever it is, you have to lean into it. Because if your feet are wet, if your feet are cold, if your feet are pinched, if your feet are cramped, you're going to have a miserable day.
That sucks. Yeah.
Yeah. So I like Nike because their Air Max ones are kind of wide and they're comfortable and they're plush and whatever. I still put my own insoles in them. I still like, so what I'm saying is for tennis, for any sort of running or whatever, I'm a free agent. Okay. Whatever's comfortable, whatever gets the job done.
You just reminded me of, we were going to a tech football game for the full day. And Billy wore brand new cowboy boots.
Oh, it's such a bad move.
To the game.
Oh, it was such a bad move.
Yeah.
That was a bad day.
That was awful.
I talked to my wife, like when we are on vacation or something and we're going to be walking around a city, don't wear flip-flops. What are you doing? This is such a bad decision. You have to think about, you have to be feet first in everything you do in life. Toes down, 10 toes down.
10 toes down.
First. Yep. If you're going to be standing in the cold, if you're going to be walking, if you're going to be doing anything athletic, it doesn't matter what the rest of your body is working with. If your feet aren't in a good place, you're done. You're toast. You're cooked.
Yep.
Well, that is a great way to end it. 10 toes down. Dan, thank you so much for joining us. What do you got coming up? Is there anything we should be aware of over at the Solid Verbal? Just keep tuning in, keep downloading.
Keep tuning in. Solid Verbal, not too much else. You can follow my pizza account if you're really desperate. I post pictures of pizza on Instagram at Valley Circle Pizza. But no, Solid Verbal for all things college football.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks again, Billy. Thank you for also being here. This was fun. And until next time, go Hokies.